and we're lucky to have him this evening. He's accomplished many things. There's many things ahead for him to accomplish. And I think you've heard enough of me tonight. So I want you to now listen to Gerard Kennedy.
Great, John. Thanks very much, and thank you all for coming out on a rainy night. It's interesting though. The sun is actually shining in Ottawa. I'm not sure what that all means, but I guess I could have been here under different circumstances, where serving up the news that there's an election around the corner. I can definitively tell you that there won't be an election this summer, and I think that's. I want to start off with that because not just because it's the current sort of currency of today in terms of what people are talking about, but I think it symbolizes quite well where we're at. You know, we basically today, a couple of meetings last night and a phone call today, Mr. Kennedy arrived at an understanding, not so much on behalf of the Liberal Party, but on behalf of the people of Canada, to get the current government to do things it wasn't prepared to do so people could be better off. And that is, frankly, what is required. Somebody has to stand up for Canadians in a way that isn't a political calculation. You know, that isn't just seeing people as part of a formula. And I think, you know, it's a little disturbing to think that we have become a country governed according to people's lowered expectations. And I think people are looking for, particularly now, and that's the interesting thing about these times, is people are looking for, where is this country going to go? And this government thing now needs to work. We have some economic uncertainty, and we actually need government to work for us. And I think one of the questions that's forming in people's minds is, can the Harper Conservatives even begin to do that? Can they get sincere and actually move some of the things that are needed to help people? And I guess what I would tell you is that our conclusion, when we got a report, you appreciate that we put them on probation effectively in January. And what happened today essentially was shortening the lease and tightening the terms of probation. Because what we got last week was a report that did not speak to a government trying its utmost to do better things for Canadians. So that, for example, we have this year 100,000 people in construction, out of work, above and beyond the same time the year before. And yet, 73,000 of those were since the budget. But the government of the day had authorization, essentially with the budget, to move forward and put those people to work, to deal with some of the uncertainty coming from the private sector, the challenges in the auto industry and so on, and move in a sort of a time-honored way where every single party had agreed, let's do some stimulus funding through infrastructure, build the things we need for tomorrow, do them a little sooner, and get people working. And yet, as I stand in front of you now, in the middle of June, there's one single job anywhere in the country that's been paid for by federal infrastructure funding. And a few days ago, the Prime Minister of this country said it was 80% underway. And suddenly underway goes in the lexicon of words like that used to be like common sense that you can't use anymore because they don't mean what they're supposed to mean. And one of the things that we're trying to do, I think, with today's arrangement, which is twofold. One, that unemployment insurance, which affects, or employment insurance, I guess it's more properly called, which affects, I hope people realize, a whole lot of people. There are a lot of folks in differing circumstances that, without realizing it until the time comes, live, you know, a paycheck or two away from where they're going to have a radical and dramatic change in their lifestyle if they were to be separated from it. Employment insurance was meant to deal with that and to reckon with that uncertainty. And what I learned, and I want to commend Don for getting Daily Bread Quebec right both times he said it. Often people would kind of trip over that. So if you translate really fast, Daily Bread, people get it mixed up. One time I was introduced as the director of the Dread Food Bank, who just kind of brought it together. But what we learned there is if you help somebody at the time when they're having the most distress, if you help them immediately, the chances of them bouncing back are 5 or 6 or 7 times more than if you wait until they hit their worst skid. And that's the difference between insurance and social assistance. Because that's where your neighbors and family and friends, and sometimes they won't even tell you, are headed unless EI gets made more accessible to match the economic times, which is a rapid disappearance of jobs in some pockets of the country, but every part of the country where employment is headed down and unemployment is headed up, that person who loses their job is stuck. And there are 58 different jurisdictions that we put in place for a time of rising employment, an entirely different thing. And until last night, and Mr. Harper faced the prospect of getting in January, it's more important to act in a fashion that Canadians will benefit than Liberals will benefit. And if you think about it, there's almost like something that one of the advisors I have when I was Minister of Education used to talk about a virtuous circle. And there's a virtuous circle, I think, to be found in how Liberals behave at their best. Setting the standard for the country when we put our own considerations to one side. And that's what we've been trying to do from the time that we voted conditional support, and that's what we're trying to do this week. And so the other things that we have the report, we have the effort to try and do things on EI, and we should be working this summer. We should all be working on behalf of Canadians. And the sense of urgency, I wish I could say, is gripped somehow the government. I think it has not. And we've got to apply either a correction or we start looking at the conditions in which we go back and talk to the people of Canada. But our first effort has to be what will, in the shortest period of time, in the most effective way, help Canadians. And that is something I get seized with a fair bit. It's almost like you wish you could reach across the aisle and kind of give the government a shake. And I have to say, I know you've heard a little bit about your local Conservative member in the news lately, here and there. And I have to say, the most disturbing thing is not ipso facto the substance of what I'm hearing, in the sense of, I think the people of Halton will get a chance to judge that. They'll decide. But the problematic part of it for everybody on the other side of the house is how you can go at a time when people are feeling some distress, whether it's about isotopes, whether it's about unemployment, and you go to your cue cards instead. You don't lay it out there for the Canadian people and say, you know what, I am here because a bunch of my neighbors vested some faith and some trust in me, and I've got a job to deliver for them. And therefore, here's what's really happening. I would love to report to you that that's what happens in committee. That, when I say, okay, let's get together as a committee and let's get the parliamentary budget officer here, and let's make sure that project by project, the money that we're borrowing on the people's behalf actually goes where it's supposed to go, and where it gets voted down, because people want to duck that responsibility. And where your current Conservative member, when faced with a problem, chose to read her cue cards day in and day out, rather than reckon with the substantive problem. On isotopes, I think it's becoming clearer and clearer that the fundamental question is, how could a government and how could a minister that knew about this problem months ago allow us to be in this situation these many months later? And I'm not, it doesn't make any sense.